Right, Pat, you're live.
Okay. You have the agenda. So let's do our pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you have the minutes of the last meeting. Any additions or corrections or does anyone?
Make a motion, we accept the March 18th meeting.
I'm gonna let the new arrivals have a minute. Did you have you had a chance to look at them?
I'm okay, yes.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Motion to, do we have a second? To be one of your choosers.
A second.
Second. All in favor? Well, first, any discussion? All in favor? Okay,
I abstained because I wasn't here.
yeah, I understand. Okay, it says the chairperson's report. Well, since you weren't here, last week, so you missed our meeting, which kind of deteriorated in my estimation. We didn't keep to an agenda and we didn't, follow Robert's Rules of Order, which we really need to do. If we're going to accomplish anything, we have to have some discipline on each of our parts. Not to talk too much, not to talk too long, and to talk on whatever the order of business is that's on, not getting off. And I'm going to call it if we're not on the topic. Now this, when I'm reviewing, you've got, I think, did you give them a handout?
Yeah, everyone has a handout on,
Would you like to talk a bit about it before I talk more?
I can if you want. The first page just kind of gives basic Robert's Rules procedural statements such as I move that and, I second, et cetera, also point of order and things like that. And then the next 17 pages are sort of an overview of Robert's Rules, why they are in place and some tips for public boards to follow. Now, Pat, I don't know that you want to go through all 18 slides today.
No, I don't think we need to. I just want to assure that everyone has them and reads them, is familiar with them, and has the responsibility, accepts the responsibility to abide by them. Because I know all of us are frustrated that we haven't accomplished as much as we would like to. And we've been kind of rudderless, it seems to me, although I will say this, that we have two things on the agenda tonight, mainly thanks to Mitch, the list of the issues that we think are that we should follow, and we'll get into that, and also a presentation regarding the land, the available land issues that the supervisors, and they reiterated that to me at the supervisors meeting this week, would like to have a presentation on the work that we did on that. And as I look back, that's a very nice, I think, document, but we need to discuss more about how we would present it and who would present it. So although it seems like we didn't do an awful lot there, those are two pretty significant items when you think about what our goals are. So I would ask you all to hearken back to if you want to talk, you need to be recognized by the chair and I'll work very hard to notice if your things are up here. placement or name tags. Okay, and you know, what the question I sort of had is when you read Robert's Rules of Order and like I say, I've operated under those a lot. It sort of suggests that in order to have a discussion, we need to have a motion on the floor. So we have two items tonight that we know we want to get to. So I'm asking you, what do you think, Alex? Do you think we should have like a motion to talk about the presentation? I move something like that. I move we discuss the presentation to the Board of Supervisors on the.
It's a good question. It's a really good question.
And then the other one is discuss our list. And that would just be a simple motion. Move we to discuss and maybe refine our list of environmental issues. Is that?
Yeah,
seem
I mean,
reasonable?
I guess procedurally it's best, especially if there's like an agenda item, generally speaking.
Yeah,
I mean, I might be a little bit too formal for a group like this, but generally especially with larger boards, and yours is pretty large. They like to see a motion on the floor in a second and then discussion.
yes.
And you can always,
Well,
especially for like.
then there are
agenda
rules
items.
of discussion. And that's another thing I want to bring up. We can set time limits. First of all, how long we want the meeting to last. But we all have to agree on that. And then timeframes for speaking. Now, what Robert's Rule of Order suggests is that nobody speaks more than 2 minutes on a motion. And that everybody have an opportunity to speak, but not keep speaking. After you've made
Right.
your
Yeah,
comments, that's it. I mean, that you have 2 minutes to make your comments. And then we should move on to whoever the next commentator would be. Is everybody sort of in agreement with that? I won't be so formal about it, but
I suppose it depends on what we're talking about and when, but yes.
I mean,
As opposed to last week where we're
Yeah.
talking about who we are and what we're doing, probably requires a little bit longer discussion, but yeah.
okay. Oh, and I wanted to also mention to you guys that I did mention to, at the supervisors meeting that we discussed the fact that our power is very vague, if nothing. I mean, if there's no power to enforce what we do. However, the supervisors all agreed that if we thought there was an action that needed to be accomplished, that we should bring it to them and they would take the action. And they committed that they would pay attention. But of course, if we do that, we're gonna have to, when we do that, we need to have our pros and cons and issues pertaining to that particular thing. Okay, Alex, is there anything you think I should mention?
but just, if everyone could just go through that document and maybe come back to the next meeting and have during this agenda item, maybe you can have a discussion on that thing as chair. That's up to you, but it's something you can put night, you need something to help you fall asleep. It'd be a good thing to read through just to familiarize yourself with general best practices. It's not like it's not like if you stray from those, it's not like we're gonna get in too much trouble. But it's just best practices for groups, especially the speaking orders and, making the motions and seconds, and you can amend motions and things like that, and the chair clarifying what the motion is.
And
Good
staying on the
practice.
subject. I mean,
Staying on the subject is absolutely critical. I would say one of the most important things, and that's why we have number 8, council member comment, where if you have other things that that burning desires,
I think
things
that
like
was
that,
great, yes.
wait until you get through your business and then you have the opportunity to have the floor.
And I would suggest, if you have issues, those are the things to bring up at that time, and then we can decide in future meetings, how to deal with those issues. Okay, is everybody,
I would only suggest that one of the issues I have is the way the agenda is put together. And I think that each of us should have the opportunity to propose agenda items, if we so desire, before it's finalized.
well, why don't we do this? Why, if you have agenda items, why don't you bring them up in the discussion? That when you have an opportunity to discuss at the end of a meeting. And then those could be included some way or another in the agenda.
That's a good idea.
The only problem with that is that other people are caught flat-footed. If you want to bring something up and have a discussion on it,
Well, no, I mean, you would bring it up and discuss your issue today. And then if you think it should be an agenda item,
I personally don't like that because I would like everybody to know what agenda item.
well,
But I mean, any proposed agenda item would be subject to you and Alex agreeing to it. The only point I'm making is that we don't have any input.
listen, I'm saying to you, if you bring up an agenda item in the discussion, we'll record that. I mean, if you think it's an agenda item, then it'll be on the agenda.
That is, yeah, I mean, does anybody else have any comments on this, just the chairperson's report? Robert's rules in general, I mean, Mitch made a good comment. Don't necessarily need to discuss that.
We should get through that first, the Robert rules of order. Point of order.
Well, I'm finished. If you all
The
have,
point of order is that we should finish with the Robert rules of orders and then
well,
discuss it.
is there anything else you want to talk
No,
about in the
I think we all agree that that is the way we should operate, and I think to a great extent, I don't know what happened during the last meeting, but to a great extent, we've been operating that
I
way.
made a lot of noise. That's what happened.
I'm sorry.
I made a lot of noise last meeting.
So I mean, I mean,
It
you
wasn't-
can't disagree with running an official meeting
the whole thing kind of,
according to Robert's rules. I wouldn't get too sticky about it, like Alex said. I mean, stand up while you're talking, and I mean, if you really operate by Robert's rules, it gets to be very burdensome, but the general concepts are absolutely the right thing.
okay, is there agreement on that?
Yeah.
I don't think we need a motion or anything on that. We just have a general agreement that is gonna be our modus operandi. I don't think I pronounced that right. All right. So
Next item.
the, old business,
The sewage and water tour, so
Yeah.
Saturday, is everyone here gonna go?
I won't be making it, no.
You can't make it?
No.
Okay. Everybody else is gonna make it?
I'm going,
Pat, Ken, Eric?
I am uncertain right now, because I've got a semi-commitment on Saturday.
At 9?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the township would like everyone to come. It is, you can stay for an hour or you can stay for the next part. The most important one starts at 9. That's the sewage plant.
Yeah.
The water treatment plant is optional.
All right.
But I would say if everyone can come, I'll be there, but if everyone can be there for that one, it'll give everybody a new insight onto what happens when you flush your toilet. With the caveat being that particular plant that you're visiting is not actually does not service Smithfield Township, but it's a model for, like, the one that does service Smithfield Township is the East Stroudsburg wastewater plant, and also the one up near Lake Valhalla, owned by the sewer authority. But the East Stroudsburg one, from a technological standpoint is, I would say, to say nicely, outdated compared to the one you're gonna visit. So might be something to, think about for some of the wastewater plants here in the township, like the Malawami one, where you have the smell of the sewage, and the Stroudsburg one, which also has the smell of sewage and has some challenges and outdated technologies. So It's sort of a model wastewater plant for how wastewater should be dealt with at a municipal level, and I think. You know, when you just remember, this isn't where your sewage is being treated, but this is a model, this is where a large portion of the county's sewage is being treated, all the boroughs, Stroud Township, Pocono Township, that all goes to that plant, so. It's a good example of how a really high volume wastewater plant can still. Maintain water quality and its effluent to a reasonable degree. You're never gonna get everything out, but you can at least minimize.
Should give us some ideas about,
Yeah, like the
What we
smell, for
should be
example,
looking
like
for.
you won't smell anything there because they have vacuums. On top of all their batch reactors that remove, so that's just an advanced technology which could benefit the community.
well, I guess I should recognize myself, but should we go to one that covers us so we can make some suggestions?
We have tried, but we have struggled to get an
Oh,
invitation
right, I remember now, yeah.
for reasons that still remain a little bit murky to me.
Well, what if we
No
did,
pun intended.
what if we did, what if we did a formal request from the Board of Supervisors?
I think we tried that.
Oh, we did?
They don't technically have any power over what the sewer authority does or what the East
Well, who
Stroudsburg.
has the power?
Those boards, those are separate entities from the township.
No, but I mean, is there a board chair
Yeah, they have meetings here every month.
here?
Michael Albert is on their board, so maybe with him there, he might, but it's not, for now, we're just gonna focus on 9 AM this coming Saturday.
Where do we meet?
I sent an Outlook invite to everybody. It's like 10 minutes from here. It's across from, I mean, I put it in the invite and I sent everybody an email with the address.
I remember the email. I don't,
What is the address? Do
the
you-
details of your invites don't.
You
Never
guys,
come up on my desk.
I just sent an email. I can send another one to everybody if you want with the exact address that you can put in, but it's very easy. It's not like, you know, it's literally right there in Stroudsburg, like. Right, you cross the bridge from where Walmart is, cross the Broadhead Creek, and it's like right there. It's pretty tough to miss, but I will make a note here to
Oh,
send
I know
that.
where it is.
Yeah, I'll send that to everybody.
It doesn't smell.
State-of-the-art technology, and the effluent does not have chlorine in it either, which is a big water quality benefit.
Okay. Next,
Next is the open space inventory. I can start, I mean, before you guys make a motion or anything, I'd be happy to just kind of go over the draft presentation. If maybe you want to just direct your attention to the screen, I can.
and keep in mind, I think the people who worked on this should present it to the supervisors, which Mitch is you primarily, right? You and my suggestion.
Ken
And
and
Ken.
Alex.
Well,
and I had
Yeah,
a
yeah,
meeting.
okay, that's my suggestion, that you guys do it.
All right, can everyone see on the screen?
Yep.
All right, so the first slide is. The bubble map. The bubble map shows the areas of the township. Which were identified by the Environmental Advisory Council, the previous Open Space Board. And also the subcommittee as general areas that were desirable for potential consideration for land acquisition. So there's one here in the Shawnee Valley area. There's one here sort of in the Mount Nebo waterfront park. Marshall's Creek general area. There's one over here in the Little Sambo Creek headwaters. There's one up here in the sort of near Marshall's Falls Park. There's a little one over here near the East Stroudsburg Reservoir properties. And then the last one is down here along Joffrey's Ridge, which is sort of kind of, you know, separates Cherry Valley from the Stroudsburg area. That ridge there. So that's the bubble map. And if we did a bubble map because
Can you see that all right? Yeah.
we have some here, if you want to just grab a copy. We did a bubble map because we were, it's best practice to not just list all of the properties because the general range is more beneficial for these considerations. So no, you know, ideally, you don't want to target specific properties by their like parcel ID unless there's something uniquely important about it, like the Buttermilk Falls or Twin Falls or something like that. So that's why we do it this way. We also don't want any property owner to feel like, ooh, like they're looking at my property. The next. Go. Just do this. So the next slide is this flow chart. Now, Mitch, you might remember the flow chart from our subcommittee meeting where we all thought it'd be a good idea to sort of visualize, sort of like, let's say there's this land or property that's somebody comes to the township and they say, hey, I want to sell you my, 300-acre property, board of supervisors. Then this is designed for the board of supervisors to say, okay, well, let's pull this thing out and take a look at what we should do considering the situation. So the first thing is, does the township have available funding for open space acquisitions? Has it budgeted for that? If not, then the answer is that's the end of the conversation right there. But if there happens to be some money available, the next question is, is it a willing seller? So, under that hypothetical scenario, that person sounds like they're willing, so that's good. That's the general rule with any land acquisition is the seller of the property must be willing to sell it. Now, the other part of that is it at fair market value? Because a township cannot purchase land for more than fair market value or assessed value, right? So if the township hires an assessor for, I don't know, $800 to assess the value of the property, and it's determined to be worth, let's say it's worth $500,000. And the landowner says, well, I believe it's worth 1.5 million. The township can't give that landowner 1.5 million. They can only give the landowner what it's assessed at. So that's really important that they're not only willing to sell, but at fair market value.
And you should change this to assessed value,
Okay.
because there's a big difference between assessed value and fair market value, as you all know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, set value and fair market is two different things.
Which is the highest?
Fair market.
Fair market.
Yeah, we have to. That's a good catch. But anyway, that's the general rule of thumb with municipal acquisitions.
And it's gonna be hard to, just a comment, can I comment?
Yeah.
It's gonna be very hard to find someone that wanted to sell a piece of property at assessed value when the fair market value 99% of the time is gonna be higher.
Yeah, oftentimes land acquisitions by townships, they have a significant amount of donated value. So the landowner often really for emotional reasons or historic reasons really wants that land to be protected by the township for whatever reason, and they were willing to sacrifice a certain amount of profit for that cause.
Since I broke the rules and let them speak, does anybody else have anything they wanna say right this minute?
Okay, that's the story. They talk to any land trust. There's often, and this is, I think Kate Roman had mentioned that when she gave the presentation when she came in, there's often a donated value associated with this situation. Okay, the next, now let's say you meet all those criteria, which is a big step. Then it's also really important to make sure you have grant eligibility, because the township wants to, if they happen to have money available to purchase land, which currently your township doesn't, but let's say, in 10 years you do, you don't want to just liquidate that savings account or whatever it is just to buy the land. You want to leverage it as much as possible, right? So let's say you only have $2 million dedicated to it in 10 years from now. You don't want to use that all up on one acquisition. You want to leverage that 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 as much as you can. And the way to leverage it is you apply for like DCNR grant funding. So you can let like that property, let's say it's $500,000. They want to sell at the assessed value of $500,000. And the township happens to have $1 million. Well, the township just to be good fiduciary responsibility supervisors, you don't want to spend $500,000 on that. You want to put $250,000 towards a $500,000 grant, right? That's just a smart way to utilize taxpayer dollars.
Makes
And if, and there's sometimes cases where you can leverage it even more, like if the county commissioners someday decide to do another bond, you can leverage it 3 to 1 or even 4 to 1. So back when a lot of the lands were purchased in the early 2000s, the commissioners at that time had a policy of having an open space money available so that the townships could leverage taxpayer dollars many times. So you just, the taxpayers, it was like a win-win-win for taxpayers. And it's even better if the township has their own dedicated open space. Right now, the commissioners don't have that policy. So is the property eligible? And those are typically your roots, DCNR, LSA, but land trusts can also sometimes help. Depending on the situation, if it's like, if it has large acreage, critical habitat protection, habitat connectivity, water quality benefits, or public recreation access for activities, if it meets enough of those criteria, sometimes you can get a land trust really excited and they can help out even further. So you stretch taxpayer dollars even further. So basically, if it checks all those boxes, then yes, pursue acquisition, right? If it doesn't meet grant eligibility, now you're in that situation where, okay, where you're not going to get the most bang for your buck, but maybe it's already connected to an existing park, because that adds a lot of value. Like if you can double the size of Mount Nebo Park, but you can't get grant funding, the cultural value of doing that might outweigh the negativities of not being able to stretch your dollars as far as you otherwise could. Does that make sense?
No,
So if you have the opportunity to, so usually you have to have a property that's a lot of acres to get DCNR grant funding.
right,
Like, because they want to know that you can build a parking lot, you can put a little something there, and you can build trails, you can make it into like its own standalone park, sort of like Mount Nebo. But if it's only 20 acres, then no grant funding agency is going to fund that, but it might be directly adjacent to Mount Nebo. So you can sort of incrementally expand your parks that way.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And and that makes a lot of sense because, you know, you don't have to build a new parking lot, you don't have to you don't have to put nearly as much capital into an acquisition like that. So in the long run, it actually might make more sense.
Got it.
Yeah, that makes sense to everybody? And then, yeah, so basically, if it is already directly connected to an existing park, then it's recommended to pursue acquisition. If it's not, then you have to take into consideration what I just said. Is it more than 20 acres? Does it have road access for a driveway? Can you actually turn it into a park? Because you don't want to be buying islands of land that no one can ever get to and no one can ever park at and you can never build a trail. So you need to make sure that if you do buy land without grant funding, it better be a really, really desirable parcel that could become a really nice park in the future. And the main criteria there, is it large enough? Is it, you know, it should be like the size of Mount Nebo Park if you're going to do that, because that makes it more worthwhile for capital expenditures. And then if it's not more than 20 acres and it doesn't have any of those things, then the only reason to pursue it would be if it has significant cultural value. So like, let's say like Buttermilk Falls property became available, or like they call it they call it the Native American chair. Where there's, you know, this big monument or some sort of anthropologic site that makes it so important to protect that it's worth doing it, considering despite the fact that it's only, you know, 5 acres. Like the Buttermilk Falls is the one that comes to mind.
Mhm.
Like if that little section of the property could become available, that might be a desirable acquisition, even though it doesn't really meet a lot of these criteria. So that's pretty much the flow chart. The next slides basically summarize the open space criteria, and that's what the supervisors wanted us to really hone in on, was not just the flow chart. The flow chart's just sort of designed to make this an easy thing to digest. But the criteria chart, which you see up there on the screen, kind of lists. I'll just read it. It says, when evaluating open space opportunities, the township should prioritize properties based on the following criteria: willing seller to appraised value, sufficient acreage, grant funding eligibility, freshwater resources, cultural value, and accessibility. A lot of this stuff I already talked about in the flow chart.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, you know, instead of just giving the supervisors a list of criteria, we wanted to also visualize that list.
Okay,
Freshwater resources being really important, I would say, because that is large acreage and freshwater resources opens up properties to much more grant funding than they otherwise would if it was just a large property without any streams, without any wetlands, without any lakes. You know, even if there's a small stream running through it, it increases the criteria at the DCNR offices. So the next sections here are basically just an overview of the bubble map items. So I don't need to read every single line here, but you basically had the subcommittee identify these bubbles on the bubble map with a vision in mind. It wasn't just random. It was because, like, for example, the first one is the Mount Nebo Park Expansion Complex. Now, the subcommittee identified a number of large parcels directly adjacent to Mount Nebo.
May I let them have this?
Yeah, I mean, I have some extras here too. I think I handed this out at the last meeting. Does that make sense? So basically that one bubble in the middle of it is the Mount, we didn't name them on the map, but we kind of called them by names because it makes it easier to sort of interpret what the work the committee did. So we identified a number of parcels which directly connect to Mount Nebo Park, which could eventually result in a much larger Mount Nebo Park complex. Which could be, you know, several hundred acres more than you currently have.
That would be nice.
The next one is the Upper Marshalls Creek, Marshalls Falls Expansion Complex. So Marshalls Falls Park is pretty small currently. But there's a lot of large properties nearby which could potentially be added to that park where you could create more loop trails, mostly just loop trails, because one of the things about a lot of these bubble maps, which are pretty desirable from a township standpoint, is that the amenities you would have are mostly hiking trails and walking trails, which don't cost a lot of money from a township to upkeep. Like the amount of money it costs to upkeep Mount Nebo Park is actually pretty low compared to like Minisink Park, which is very high. Anytime you start having amenities, it starts costing a lot of money to upkeep them. So the Mount Nebo Park Expansion Complex, the initial outlay and the initial building of the trails would probably be, you know, cost a little bit, but in the long term, the maintenance is pretty minimal. So that is a good thing. And also, like the Marshalls Falls Expansion Complex, some of those properties are still mostly forested and could be loop trails. Other ones do have fields. So, you know, theoretically, they could become something more recreational, but, you know, when you look at those sorts of properties, you have to keep in mind that if you start having large areas of lawn or clubhouses or anything of that nature, you're starting to increase the price exponentially over just walking trails. But it's a really desirable complex up there because you have direct access to Marshalls Creek, there's wetlands, and it's also been identified for members of the public as sort of a town center. A lot of people have a lot of, when they go through that area, it's important to residents of the township from what we've been told. The next one is Joffrey's Ridge. Now, this is another mostly forested ridge along the Broadhead Creek. And I don't know, I don't have the acreage listed here because it's not really designed to say exactly how many acres, but it's, you know, well over 100 acres. And it already connects to Glen Park, and it also connects to county open space land. So it does check most of the criteria for grant funding in that cluster. The next one is the headwaters of Little Sambo Creek. Now, this is sort of right when you come outside of this road here and you make a right. So if you go outside of the parking lot and then you make a right, you follow that road to that intersection there, you'll notice there's a huge wetland back there. That's one of the two headwaters for the Little Sambo Creek. And it's a couple of hundred acres of well-preserved wetlands back there, which is quite remarkable. I think it says here 150 acres of well-preserved boggy wetlands. So that in and of itself is a phenomenal resource from a public, you know, welfare standpoint, and also just a general societal benefit standpoint. And it provides the headwaters and helps preserve drinking well water for most of the residents in this Little Sambo Creek watershed, which is a pretty big portion of your township. And it's also like right in the middle of the township. So, you know, wetlands have a tremendous number of ecosystem services. It's, you know, from water purification to wildlife habitat, you name it, wetlands benefit the township in a lot of ways. And it'd be nice to have those resources permanently protected, so you don't have issues. Let's say, you know, the regulations at the federal level change or the state level change in 20 years, those wetlands, you know, for sure will be protected.
Where is that on the map?
That is to the left of, now again, we didn't name them, but it's. I can show you after I'm done. I just have a couple more I just want to get through here. Shawnee Valley cluster properties. Now, this is obviously one that comes up a lot here in Smithfield Township and has been coming up a lot in Smithfield Township for a really long time. So I think most folks here recognize that Shawnee Valley is an exceptional ecological area, and it's also exceptionally important from a cultural standpoint. And it also happens to have a lot of parcels of land that are a sizable acreage that are not currently developed. And not all of them have streams running through them, but they span over 500 acres, and they do have, and you know, if you would acquire enough acreage of them, you could create a pretty nice new park there, sort of adjacent to the national recreational area, or you could potentially flip it over to the national recreation area, sort of like how the Mosher's Knob was became part of the national recreation area. And then Mosher's Knob is, I think, in that area, and that is you know, Mosher's Knob is a tremendous conservation success story. If you look at, you know, what was accomplished there and, you know, the critical wildlife habitat, it's, you know, something to, you know, applaud. And this is in that general area. And then the last one we had here was two more, sorry. These were smaller areas, the waterfront park expansion in Twin Falls, right? You had, you know, waterfront park, there's a parcel of land directly adjacent to the park, but has Twin Falls on it. You know, the township doesn't currently own Twin Falls, but because of the, you know, cultural value of protecting, there's also a bog and / lake back there. It would be a desirable smaller acre acquisition to expand.
Is that where the paper mills are at?
No, it's literally right here, James. If you drive down Twin Falls Road, there's the Twin Falls right there. I'm sure you've been there. It's.
Went the other day,
If
just
you
accidentally.
take a left out of the parking lot and then you go to the waterfront house and you make a right and you just follow it down, there's the Twin Falls is right there, but it's not public land. And so that was one of the reasons why the committee thought that'd be a desirable parcel, even though it's a single parcel and it's not very many acres, it's already connected to this park, and it'd be, you know, it would almost certainly get grant funding. Because I think it's 30 acres and it has a waterfall on it, it has stream frontage, but it would be a little complicated. But who knows? And then the last one was Buttermilk Falls and adjacent lands, which has been brought up many times here at DAC. So basically, that's all I wanted to say on that, and now I would just turn it over to council for discussion. What I can do is pull up the map.
Well, first of all, I think we need to have a motion to prepare a presentation for the supervisors. What do you think? And then discuss what it should be in it.
Sure. But that's based on what we have here.
Mhm.
Yeah, like this is your draft,
Yeah.
and you could move that you take this draft and bring it to the supervisors next with the modification that Mitch had mentioned with the
Well, it doesn't have to be that specific, does it, Alex? I mean, they don't have to take the draft. They can cut and paste and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you can, yeah, but either way, you can make a motion, you know.
Using this material, I think that would be the best way to say it. Using this material, prepare a, presentation for the supervisors. Oh, yes, sir.
Would we want to prioritize which of these are mobile properties we would?
Well, I think what we can do, if we have that motion on the floor, you could, sure. That would be part of the,
Could we have a discussion before we have a motion to discuss what Alex just presented?
sure, not according to Robert's Rule of Order.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, the township wants this to move forward, so the township wants this to get before them sooner rather than later. So I think it'd be, based on the feedback I got from the township, it would probably be okay to make the motion to proceed, and then you don't have to do it. You can modify the motion, you can amend the motion, but
I make the motion that we proceed.
Second? Is there a second?
Oh, second, I guess.
Okay. Now, discussion, and please use your,
Pat, can you clarify what the motion was? Because, you might want to be a little more detailed than
I
that.
make the motion that we proceed on the draft to be presented to the township supervisors
using the materials.
using the materials. That better?
I think procedurally, Pat, you just need to clarify. Or you could just make an amendment to that
Okay.
effect. Pat, you can clarify the motion on the floor. As long, so basically the motion on the floor is, it was already seconded by Ken. But just, Pat, you can clarify that you move that that the EAC proceed with the draft to be presented to the board of supervisors, the draft. Just use the agenda item. What's written on the agenda, the draft open space, right? To be
Okay.
presented to the supervisors, is
That's
that,
fine.
okay,
I so clarify.
okay, perfect. You just, when you make motions, try to be as specific as possible so that we, and that's not a criticism, it's just helpful that, because when I'm
No.
recording secretary and taking the minutes, I have to like,
I thank you for your.
yeah,
Your input.
All right,
yeah.
Mitch,
You made it clear.
Mitch,
So just a couple of comments on your presentation, as we talk about this. I think it's very important in this map to label these bubbles with the names. So that when people look at this and we're talking about the Shawnee Valley cluster properties, they can see where it is. So I think that would be one addition that would be very important here. The other question that I have is when we talk about Mount Nebo Park. It says Mount Nebo Park is located on the eastern ridge of Shawnee Valley. Why do I think it's the western ridge of Shawnee Valley?
Because it is.
Because it is the western.
Okay, and then, these properties span the ridge and extend down to Marshall's Creek. These, what does it say? Several large acreage properties exist to the east within Marshall's Creek. I think it's to the west. Right?
I think you're right. Mount Nebo Road runs north and south,
Thank you.
so it's, you know, you got the east side and the west side.
So those are just two specific questions that. we
now
should probably
questions,
fix.
corrections,
Pardon?
corrections, I would say.
Well, I've read this before, but it didn't register with me until tonight. The other thing is that I'm really not in favor of preparing any more on this than we already have. I'm not in favor of spending time putting together a big PowerPoint presentation or anything like that. I think we have the information. We can send it to the supervisors and they can read it. And then we can answer questions. I don't think we need a presentation, and I'm not in favor of spending any more time on this because very little is gonna happen as the result of it.
Other comments?
I agree with Mitch.
The only caveat there is the supervisors want you to present it. So I'm happy to present it to them. You know, on behalf of you guys, if you guys don't want to present it, but they want a presentation.
I would make the motion that Alex Jackson, PhD, make the presentation before the supervisors on the draft that we've just made a motion on.
We already have a motion on the floor.
Right, but I made another motion that
Well,
since
we,
the board of supervisors are
we
looking for
can't-
a presentation.
we can't
You
do
can
that.
amend it.
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, well, I amend That's what I'm doing. I'm amending my
Making a
motion.
motion to amend.
Okay, so making the motion to amend so that Dr. Jackson will make the presentation before the Board of Supervisors on the draft that we just agreed on.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second,
Okay. Okay. So you can discuss the amended motion now.
May I? I think it's important for a committee member to be involved in the presentation to show that all the work that has been done. I certainly not me. One of you guys that worked so hard on it.
well, I think we should all be there.
That was my question. Should we be present
We
at the
should be there,
presentation
yes.
to answer questions or just show our support for the idea?
That makes sense, especially the subcommittee members like Mitch and Ken and Brett, who put the most time into this. I think all of you should be there. Yeah, you know, even if you don't want to be the one that gives the presentation, I do think it's very important to be there. So if they have any questions about the subcommittee, you can answer them. And you can make comments.
Do you need a motion for that?
No, I don't, I feel like your motion is satisfactory.
That's fine, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
How
more
much
so,
time are the supervisors gonna give us to discuss this subject?
you know, they said something like, you know, your typical, I'm just gonna take this off the screen now since you guys are kind of.
Alex, when will the supervisors meet for the presentation?
Well, the supervisors need to put it on their agenda, so it won't be next week. But maybe the week after. It's up to them. I can reach out to you guys and let you know when it's gonna be on the agenda.
Okay, and the supervisors normally meet on Tuesdays or what?
Yeah, Tuesdays at 6 p.m.
Okay.
Just want to clarify one point. I didn't think anybody thought that there was gonna have to be a whole bunch more work done. This is the work that would be given to the supervisors. So,
The word presentation means different things to different people.
well, I'm telling you that the
Yeah.
presentation was meant to use these materials as a presentation that Alec has worked so hard on. And that the idea that it be one of you guys was just to give recognition to the fact that you worked on it and you did it, and that was it. So I don't even think we needed the amendment, but that's okay.
Well, if I understand this, then the presentation will not prioritize any of the 5 areas. We'll just present them as they are.
Yes, correct.
And it will be up to the supervisors to decide
Yeah.
which parcel, which would be worth going after and which wouldn't.
And from my way of thinking, I don't think they're going to prioritize. I think this is just an informational piece for them to have in the files. Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding in discussions with some of the supervisors, to have in the files so that if something did come up, they would at least have the background of how to proceed, or whether or not it was on one of our lists or one of this list. If it was, all the little 5, 6 things that needed to be done. So I think this is just an informational document. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, the Smithfield Township, I should say, pointed out that it's also one of your mission statements in the ordinance that you're supposed to advise the board on these things and also to make recommendations on the possible use of lands and keep an inventory. So this is exactly why they appointed you to this position, to do this sort of thing. So it's very important.
Now, aren't we glad we did what we were supposed to do?
Well, if I recall that Michael, who's not our council anymore, he warned us that there's no money for this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so nothing's likely to happen.
Yeah.
Did I misread what he said?
No, that's correct. There's That's not, the township's not gonna. There's just no money available for it at this time, but you know, if you get new
Well, if
commission,
money's
you know,
available,
if
but
the
they're
county
not willing to
commissioners
spend it.
change, Mitch. And let me, and I'll get to you soon, but if the county commissioners change in a couple of years, now they have new. Policies where all of a sudden they go back to how it used to be, where they start protecting open space again, now all of a sudden there's money available. And, you know, maybe the township also has, you know, something, you know, and now all of a sudden, you know, the whole entire landscape could change very dramatically depending on who gets elected to those positions. So it's something that you wanna have in your back pocket and you don't currently have. And you've taken the torch that the open space committee almost kind of got to and then sort of dropped it, you picked it up and you sort of, you know, slam dunked it. That's how I see it. And so now you're in a position to, at some point in the future, when the county decides to, you know, do this sort of policy again, or the supervisors do, then you can, you know, the township residents can take advantage of the work that you've done.
Mitch,
Since the item 2B says make recommendations, I think something needs to be added to this that says, what are our recommendations to the supervisor?
That's what the presentation is all about.
I'm
So
sorry,
our recommendation is the presentation.
is to consider the materials presented, right?
a recommendation is a recommendation. I mean, what are we gonna recommend?
That they
To
should,
consider the properties that are on the list, right? Isn't that what they're gonna do? Look at these properties here. These are the recommended.
how would
parcels.
you word it, Mitch?
I don't know. That
Did you,
they
did you work
use
on this?
this process.
Yeah, we were together.
Okay, so,
Well, there's two people talking though.
Yes,
But you said the process and we'll get to James.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think it just needs to be. You need to have specific recommendations. These, you know, consider these properties, is that a recommendation?
Well, then you're getting into prioritizing, aren't you?
right, and I think that's beyond, isn't that beyond our scope?
Uh,
Which, all we're
you're
doing
not
is,
recognized, Dave, sorry. If you wanna be,
yeah, I wanna be recognized.
put your little thing up there, get that kind of.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, you're right in that.
All right. I think it's beyond our scope. I think that we have the list of these are the recommended parcels. This, it doesn't constitute the areas that are in the bubbles. So it's up to the supervisors now to make that choice. So they will prioritize what properties they're going to go after first. They'll look at the most desirable and which one is gonna be more cost effective, and that'll be their call, not ours, so I think we just beating the drum, you know.
I agree.
Okay, and I call for a point of order so that we can move on to the next item on the agenda.
Well, I think we're talking about, do we make a recommendation or not? The item here says, make recommendations as to the possible use of open land areas within the township. So however we present this, however Alex presents it, it should say, this is what the council recommends. Whatever that is.
I think James's point was that this is your recommendation.
Right.
This is because they currently have nothing. This is sort of a framework that this is your recommendation, that in the future, and Pat, I know, I don't want to have the floor more than I have to, but this is your recommendation. It's very specific, it's very detailed, it's lengthy, and you have a flow chart, and like, I feel like this whole thing is a recommendation. And, you know, I don't know that we need to start getting into the nuances of the ordinance on this agenda item, but it's a good thing at some future time, we can talk about the ordinance and maybe recommend to the supervisors refining it, but I don't think that's what's being discussed here.
I would just anticipate that the supervisors will say, what is our recommendation? And we should be ready to answer that question if we don't present it up front.
Well, isn't it that they consider these issues as land becomes available, or
You know, I just don't know that that's what we're talking about
Right.
here. I mean, we're just
Okay.
talking about, you know, you have a motion on the floor and send this to the supervisors to present it, and that's, you know, that's what's germane to discuss at this time.
Okay. Question?
You can get public comment. I would probably be good to get some public comment on this actually, before it gets to supervisors. That'd be my recommendation before you call a vote. Any public comment on this?
I do.
Okay,
Page 3, the headwaters of Little Sambo Creek. Last year in May, in Lake Valhalla General Meeting, Robert Levenheim came out regarding his, echo park that he wanted created. And the HOA and the residents said no, that they don't want a public park in a private community. I see that is still there, and, the last meeting that we had, I advised the HOA president, and she is really upset, even though we said no, and it's still on the inventory list.
I'm trying to think how to do this procedurally. You have anything else you like to add?
No, I just wanna make sure that it should be off the inventory list that you guys have drafted.
Should we amend the motion that,
No, that's just wait a minute, okay.
Well,
well, I'm just asking a question.
well, I mean, so, you know. The comment is that, you know, so the Lake Valhalla is. It's actually not even in the bubble. So
why is Lake Valhalla's name on the inventory list?
we're to say. It flows downstream to your, let me not say your lake, it flows downstream to the lake, so. This is the headwaters that forms the source water for Lake Valhalla. So the intent of the township is to protect the source water to keep the downstream lakes clean. But the lake itself, and I'm not sure what Robert had presented, but that's not up for acquisition. The properties on the bubble map form the headwaters, so they're a couple miles away. Right, that's where the springs bubble up and that's where the source water form, because it's not, Lake Valhalla is not a, I might get in trouble by telling you guys this, but it's not a natural lake. It used to be something other than a lake, and it was impounded. Like 99% of the lakes in Monroe County are not natural.
It's man-made.
So what happens when you don't have a natural lake is that means you have an inflow and an outflow, and it would behoove you to make sure whatever flows into that lake is very clean and protected, because anything that happens upstream is gonna flow into those lakes. And so the intent of the bubble map is to protect the source water of that lake. So I feel like if anything, it helps the Lake Valhalla community by protecting the source water. Does that clarify? Because it's not, you see what I'm saying, Vicky?
No, I'm just wanna make sure, and the Lake Valhalla residents wants to make sure, because he did come to one of the meetings and gave his proposal.
Yeah.
And so you're aware of it, because you were included in the emails.
I don't know exactly what the supervisors did. I wasn't part of that presentation or the preparation of it. All I know is that on the topic at hand, the bubble map for the headwaters of Little Sambo Creek do not currently include any land within the Lake Valhalla
So on
Association.
this map, since everything is squeezed up,
Mhm.
because I couldn't find Lake Valhalla, can you circle it
Yeah,
and tell me where Lake
that's not
Valhalla is? Tiny map.
yeah, it's basically,
Good.
Good.
it's right there. Right. It's a little tough because I don't actually have the.
So the comment is the association
Lake
doesn't want a public park
Okay.
on their
Right.
property.
Right, but it has, what's
So these are the.
What's being
headwaters, and it
proposed
flows
is
this
not
way,
part of
will
the
eventually be-
homeowners association.
And this has come up, if you recall, this has come up before.
Yeah, but it's not curved into it.
Mhm.
It's not curved
As
into
near as I can
No,
tell, it's
it
not
isn't.
part of this.
it, which is fine.
Okay.
That's-
Well, I don't think we should have.
But I hear you, and I understand what you're saying.
It's not curved into these.
Yeah.
All right,
We're good.
so,
Okay.
so we've clarified the public comment, Pat.
Cause
Okay. So now do we have a question? We have the question?
Yeah.
Would you tell us what is on the motion that's on the,
It's, oh, that's a good point. So it's, That the EAC proceed with the draft open space presentation to the Board of Supervisors, and that Alex Jackson will present it to the Board of Supervisors.
And the other, the subcommittee, would we be part of the presentation?
That's not part of the motion, but it, you
No,
know,
we can just,
but that's the motion is basically that you proceed with that,
Dr. Jackson will make the presentation.
that I'm to make the presentation, and that, you know, it could be noted in the minutes that it is highly, highly, highly recommended that all of the subcommittee people who helped make this presentation appear there to support the endeavor. So that would be Mitch, that would be Brett, that'd be Ken.
Well, Brett is still convalescing, right?
Yeah, if he's feeling up to it,
Right.
you know, and you can just make it more specifically. You know, the motion is basically that. I think I said the draft open space inventory presentation be presented to the Board of Supervisors using this material that you saw today, and that Alex Jackson would give it with the presence of the subcommittee. Is that, everyone feel good about that?
That's a good one, yes.
Okay,
okay, now is that formally the motion? And do we have to have a second to that now, or?
no, you're just clarifying the
Okay,
motion, so
all
you're
right,
good.
yeah, I read, we can do that.
Just like
Okay.
to make one more.
Everybody okay with that?
I'd just like to make one more comment, and that is, that I think the recommendation, because in my mind, I like to check off item 2B. I think the recommendation is that we would recommend to the supervisors that they use the process that has been identified and apply it to the properties, the specific properties in these bubbles as those properties might become available.
I think that's a great recommendation.
And that way we can say, this is the work we've done, and this is the recommendation of the EAC.
Agree, agree.
Agreed.
Can you capture what I just said?
Yeah, and I'll make sure that
And that's part of the motion,
And I'll-
clarifying the motion.
right, and I'll make sure I relay that to the supervisors and I'll reach out to you all, and yes, is the answer.
I like that.
Well, I'm glad you came up with it because makes sense.
Well, that's in our, that's in the ordinance, that's our power week.
Okay,
We can do that,
Exactly.
okay.
all of that, did we vote?
No,
We are now.
first you have to vote on
Any
the,
more discussion?
first you have to vote on the amendment.
I don't think you need to vote on the.
No,
amendment.
I
It was
think-
simply clarifying the motion.
I think we clarified the motion
Okay,
without an amendment,
okay.
he said. And I agree.
That's almost Robert.
Yeah, there's an amended motion which included that I would be.
Close enough.
Yeah, yeah. I think-
Okay.
yeah.
All, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Can we do that? Can we refine a little better? Because this way, Mitch is making a good point, since we've amended. We should just make that part of when we vote on it, that we voted on the motion, the amended motion.
The amended.
I
Okay,
got that. Yeah, as recording secretary, I got all of this. So you were good. The vote's carried and you can move on to the next agenda item.
you're the bumper in this.
So, I think we can start this, but considering the time, I'm asking the committee.
Table it?
The EAC list of environmental problems is, that's gonna take us a while to discuss. And I'm happy to open it up now if you guys wanna do that. I mean, I'm asking the question of the committee, or do we table it for the next meeting? And when is the next meeting? Is that
In 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks?
It's up to you guys if you
I'm
want
not
to.
under any time constraints, and I'm happy to discuss it.
It's, you don't have to finish the discussion, Pat, tonight. I mean, you can say, you know, let's limit discussion to 5 minutes
Okay.
or something like
All right.
that. Might be a good recommendation.
All right,
It's up to you guys though. Right, so you all see, this is the last item in your packet, so you all did that exercise from our fun meeting 2 weeks ago, right? So we finally, so Mitch, I can start this agenda item just to kind of give you a little bit of a background, Mitch, since you were kind of lead on this, so. Long story short is the EAC felt that this was very important to focus on at the last meeting, and they tabled everything other than this. So this was very, very important, this list of priorities to the council. Okay, Mitch? Now, what they did is they took your algorithm and simplified it a little bit. So everybody picked 4 items from the list instead of a numeric ranking system. They just circled the 4, they had to pick 4 and they circled 4. And everybody, 5 of the council members turned in their selection. And then Mitch provided me with his selection, actually just before the meeting. And so we have 6 members of the EAC now that have sort of voted on what they see as important in the township. And with Mitch's tally in here, you know, we have it altogether. There's a lot of items that ended up just getting 1 point. And those include need for better transportation. I'm gonna kind of go from the ones that were not with the least prioritized to the most. So the outdated comprehensive plan, the blighted structures, the new river access to Delaware River, stormwater management, we got 2, so that's a little higher up, but it was not as high as some of the others. Data centers, and then need for better transportation infrastructure. Those were ranked the lowest. And then as you move up, you started to see, you know, there is more interest in stormwater management. There is a little bit of interest in preserving the peace, quiet, natural beauty, scenic view sheds. I got 2 points. Public education got a lot. That is with Mitch's score, that got 4. So that were ranked very high. The EAC authority and avoiding duplication of efforts and the evaluation of things through an environmental lens scored pretty high. Conservation, ecosystem management scored pretty high as well. The one that got the most that I can tell is water quality concerns. So you had a lot, blighted properties actually got 2, so that's kind of up there. But basically, the one that got the most was this water quality concerns. Everybody, 5 out of the 6 people who voted in favor of prioritizing water quality concerns. And so the next below that is sustainable practices in public education for the environment. And then you have the EAC authority and focusing on township matters through an environmental lens, which I was happy to see that up there because I know Michael Albert had mentioned that specifically. So it was nice to see that the group here.
Say that again, say what?
Michael Albert had mentioned.
No, not Michael.
Michael, okay.
The actual.
What do you want me to say again? It's EAC.
Priority.
EAC evaluation of township matters through an environmental lens. So that's like when the 3 Points Garden thing comes, you know, the subdivision comes, some of these land development plans or ordinances, when they come before these boards. This group thought that it was important to have an input on that. I'll make a letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
So that's what that is basically. It's, hey, you know, 3 Point Garden major subdivision. No, you guys aren't voting on it, but you guys and the township all want to see your recommendation on those things. So that when the supervisors do their final vote, they have the planning commission recommendation, they have the EAC recommendation, and then they take those into consideration. And then the other one that got a lot of ranked really high up there is Buttermilk Falls. Protecting Buttermilk Falls, ranked 3 of the 6 people voted in favor of that, and that's pretty much the list. So I think what you've done as a group, in my humble opinion, my feeling is you've taken a long list and you've narrowed it down to realistic, attainable goals. So now it's up to you guys to discuss this list, what your feelings are. You know, I don't know who the one person who didn't complete this was. 6, I don't know who it was because it was anonymously submitted. You know, nobody wrote their names on it. I do recognize that Mitch did his own exercise, but wasn't able to get the number of responses that we got for this one. And I apologize that there's sort of 2 of the same thing occurring simultaneously, and it's a little confusing. But I feel like if it's okay with you, Mitch, it might be best to just kind of run with this since it's most of what your intentions were, but not quite as precise. You know, recognizing that, you know, I'm sure from your background with numbers, this is probably going potentially could maybe, I don't know, hopefully it's satisfactory to you. We did our best. That's my feeling with what we had. But I'll defer to you since you were lead on this.
I don't believe that these really represent the accumulation of our individual priorities. What we started out with is a proven consulting method, very simple, that was developed by McKinsey and is used in businesses throughout this country and the world to prioritize issues. Many of you that submitted the 10-point evaluation of these priorities. The accumulation of 4 of those came up with a different result. So that's why I don't think that this is really that valid. However, having said that, and I'm actually quite disappointed that I sent out a request and didn't get a full response within a matter of a couple of weeks. That is disappointing for me with this group. Okay, that's all I really want to say about it. I'm willing to go with what you developed at the last meeting and support that and move forward.
Right,
Yes,
okay, don't be disappointed, Mitch, because from here. We're going to discuss, we're gonna refine it. Make it more precise and more focused. So with all this is just what we're focusing on. And then from the next meeting, when we get together, then we can prioritize, then we can make it more fine, more refined, and look for a consensus of everyone for what we need to move on. And that's when we discuss it. So we get everything going in one direction. Cause if we got more than 4, I think if we focus on more than 4 things, then we're gonna wind up going all over the place. We should focus on. From experience, focus on 4 things, and then from there you can fan out. Because once you complete your first 4, then you can prioritize anything else.
okay, James, let's let others comment.
I don't have much of a comment other than. Yeah, I agree with you both, but very simply, when we start to decide what it is that we're gonna be doing in these meetings and what we're gonna be doing with the powers that we don't have. A lot of these things, like you said, we're going to move into a broader genre of the work that we do. So everything will most likely be touched upon, and we're not losing any of our focuses. But I think that we'll see that, blighted structures, Project Creek, great, that's gonna move into a larger genre, which is, speaking to the public about what we feel like needs to be done. Okay, because we can't do anything about blighted structures. And we can't do anything about Project Creek, but we can inform people there's issues. So in my opinion was it's more about the education for me here in this group, and working with a group to decide how we educate the public on what we care about and also what the public cares about. So all of the stuff on the list is going to be a part of our, monthly, bi-monthly work here. But, how we approach that is more what I'm concerned about. So I think we're gonna keep your list, and as we focus on our work here, it's all gonna come up. But yeah, that's
Where is the public information on this? Is it,
I think that's in the education one, where it says sustainable practices / public education, sport and environment.
Where is it?
the support, that's your sustainable practices.
Yeah, it starts with
Public
sustainable
education.
practice.
Oh,
Support of environment, so sustainable practice.
Oh.
And that ranked that actually that was the second highest score.
well, certainly, public education, you made a eloquent recommendation, statement about that. And that is something we can do. We can develop a strategy, a plan, and it is a doable kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that's,
That's separate and distinct
mhm,
from item 2A, which is what we're talking about. And what we've been asked to do. That's item 2C, which says promote a community environmental program, which I'm very, very supportive of. And I would like to spend some effort on that. But the item 2A is to identify environmental problems. And here's the word that comes from the supervisors again, recommend plans and programs to the Board of Supervisors. So I wouldn't spend any more time on the prioritization process. I would pick whatever we want to pick on and start working on it so we can make some recommendations.
okay, that makes sense to me. So, how do we go about pick on whatever? Pick,
Well, yeah.
I think the
I
public,
think that's the next, then.
Yeah, all right, now, does someone want to propose an item for us to begin work on?
Well, I think we have our lists here, and Mitch has his list. I don't know if we're prepared to.
Well, here's where it gets to be a little sticky.
Yeah.
Because if it was me, what I would recommend to the supervisors is that they do something which in the prioritization that Alex, Brett, Eric, and myself did before the last meeting that you had. The highest item with the highest score for prioritization was item 1B, which is the township's outdated comprehensive plan. And I would strongly propose that that would be one of the highest rated, most prioritized items. And that would be my recommendation to the supervisors. And I made that same recommendation 3 years ago when I started investigating where we were with the comprehensive plan as part of the planning commission.
Well,
And that is a big problem in this township. And if we're gonna make a recommendation to the supervisors, whether they like it or not, that's the recommendation that I would propose that this council makes. Because until we have a comprehensive plan that is put together with the input of the 5,000 or 7,000 residents of this township, the supervisors are not going to manage this township correctly.
well, I have some feedback on that from the supervisors, from the various times that has come up. And that is that we won't get anywhere with that.
It
It will
doesn't
not
matter,
be
we
done.
should still recommend it if that's the right thing to do. If they make the decision not to do it, that's on them. That's not on us.
Well, I'm not willing to, this is me personally, I'm discussing too. I'm not willing for us to start out on a project that we know that's
Well, yeah, I don't.
not.
I'm not saying that we should do the
That's not
project,
gonna-
I'm saying that's what we should
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah, I would say that on probably in the next meeting that we discuss in general what we feel needs to be done. If the comprehensive plan was number one on the list, great. And maybe just outline it more, what needs to be done, why it should be done, and then if so, we make that the first point. We get it out of the way, and then we come back to it when and if we need to.
Well, I know you're supportive of that because you put 3 of your points, the maximum number of points on that item.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I would like to know more about.
And so
why
did
it's
Alex,
required.
and so did
Yeah.
I.
Yeah, I just think that it would be great to, as a group, just discuss, next meeting and say, you know, if that was number one, then what do we want to submit and why? And then we, if you, like you said, we get it out of the way and we move forward.
You know, what bothers me a little bit here is that we haven't dealt with this list consistently since it was first presented. And, you know, some of the different items overlapped and they didn't have equal weight. So I found it, and I filled that thing out, responded to it 3 different times in 3 different ways. And I think most of us did it at least twice. So we haven't handled this list of concerns consistently, wherever it came from. I guess you came up with the list originally, right?
No, the list, this list
That's
was,
what I'm
came from brainstorming that all of us did. And Alex captured it and presented it this way. And the idea was to just prioritize, find what the top 3 items are and start working on them, to your point, because I mean, you're absolutely right. You can't try to do everything at
All
the
of
same
it,
time.
yeah,
Okay.
so, good, because we're all on the same page now. So. Can we make a motion, to table this
To
until,
table.
to table it until the following meeting, which is,
Yeah, that's fine.
Second,
Okay.
okay, and then we can really. Hone in on what we want and make the meeting just about prioritization.
Yeah, we can do that.
In the interim, I think that, is there a motion? Is that a motion?
Yeah, that was motion
Is
table.
there a second?
And you was seconded by Mitch.
Any discussion? My discussion is that everybody should see what the plan, what's it called, the strategic plan that you're talking about?
which,
Comprehensive
The
plan.
comprehensive plan. That everyone should be familiar with the comprehensive plan. You can access it or we can get it to you.
I've read it multiple times.
I think that the recommend.
This is discussion.
Okay,
I think that,
Well, I would agree with you.
Because the comprehensive plan falls under the planning commission. And that's where it should start. We can recommend to the township, the planning commission, that's where it should be directed. Not to supervisors, because the planning commission then makes the recommendation to the supervisors about the comprehensive plan. Because it's up to the planning commission to work on a comprehensive plan to present to the planning, to these supervisors. So we can, if that's what
well,
the advisory council wants to do is work on something like this, make a recommendation, then I think the steps are, it should be recommended to the planning commission then works on it if they so choose and present it to the supervisors.
well, may I add a little bit more to the discussion? That's going to be our priority,
No.
to write to the planning committee and tell them that we want a comprehensive plan.
I was just commenting from my perspective.
Our priority is gonna be to work on the list of what we need to prioritize for next week.
Is everybody, now let's be clear, we have a motion on the floor. What is the motion?
Just to table this until your next meeting,
To table this until our next meeting.
this
okay?
list. And
Yeah.
I'll add, and just to you clarified the motion, just to, Mitch has some data that I can add to this and update it, and then we'll bring it back for another follow-up discussion.
Okay. It's fine. Everybody okay with that? Second, there was a second, right? You, okay,
Can I make just one little comment? There are two items that came out when the four of us did the prioritization that are the same as are on this list. One of them is water quality concerns. And the other one is the conservation ecosystem management.
which is the education. No.
No, that was the last one down here, item 6 on here. So there are two items that were consistent. The one that wasn't consistent, the biggest one in my mind, was the one that I brought up first, the comprehensive plan. So we could just work on the two that were the same. And that's just something to think about before our next meeting.
Yeah, okay,
But things,
good
things
suggestion.
have a habit of changing. Okay, so that's why,
You what?
things have a habit of changing, so it's best to, it's just that we've agreed to get, to table it until next week, and then next week we're gonna jump all over this. And then we can refine it down to the bear tax.
Okay, all in favor of the tabling motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the one,
Just, I don't want to interrupt you, but, you'll notice that there was one other item under new business for, starting regular EAC outreach to share concerns and updates with residents.
oh,
I'm
yes,
sure you were just.
oh,
about to
yeah,
hit that.
yes. We, in relationship to public information and keeping them informed, we had a discussion, Alex and I, about what are some of the things what are some of the mechanisms that are in place now that we could add our, information, who we are, and invite comments and that sort of thing too. And Alex, did you said the newsletter, we could maybe perhaps have a column in the newsletter that's from the EAP. And in that column, any of you would be invited if you want to do an editorial of some kind about some issue. That would be available too, but the main thing would be to tell them about our meetings and what we're trying to do, and actually what our whatever you want to call that thing that doesn't have any power in it is who we are and that sort of thing. And then the other thing was what was the other?
Yeah, that's a good idea, that you had mentioned about, having a column in the newsletter in the
Yeah,
township.
but there was another thing, the website,
Well, the other thing is,
being on the website.
There is a website.
you can update you have a website, but you can have a section in it that has like, as you do these columns, you can keep an archive of them. So that people can, go back and read them.
Okay, so maybe we table this too for next week, but, for week after next, but, I thought it went along with what you had said about trying to have some more visibility and try to get more input from
Facebook
citizens.
page.
Well, that would be two key elements of item 2C,
Right,
which is to promote a community environmental program.
Mhm,
A page on the website
mhm.
and a piece somewhere in the monthly
Newsletter,
newsletter.
on the Smithfield Township website. If you go along the menu on the top, you'll see it says, you'll see EAC. And then if you click on that, there's a drop box that'll open it up to the EAC page.
I suggest we all look at that and see if it needs to be.
Yeah, sure. I think that this kind of goes along with what I was saying before, but as we're all looking for, a way to be more productive, as a group, we can be deciding on a monthly or bi-monthly topic that is of concern to ourselves. And or concern from the public. Gives us time to look into it as a group. Discuss if we feel like it's, necessary, if it's coming to the public, or, we can say, okay, we got comment and this is what we found out. But our focuses here are a good way for us to start feeling like we're, doing something here, is to, as we, kind of bring these into more focus, use these as a way to decide on a topic and then write about it and make it known to the public. Water quality, preserving peace and quiet, we can talk about noise violations, we can talk about, any number of things. But it would certainly help me, and I think everyone here, feel like, we were part of becoming part of an active committee that has some use, for the people of Smithfield Township. So this is a really big part of it. This, focusing on, a couple different things, and then we say, okay, well, let's say we have 3 or 4, we can say part of our sustainable practices, or part of our authority in avoiding duplication of efforts regulated matters, or that's not a good one, protecting buttermilk falls. Okay, we can put out something that says, why do we want to protect buttermilk falls, and what has the township done in the past, and what are we still doing? So the township knows that we are, focusing on things that people care about. It's just it's a good way for us to update it. I mean, we can even get as crazy as, talking to biologists and, doing a little update on all the invertebrates and all of the different animals that are, in the wetlands, and explaining why we're trying to protect these wetlands. Big one for me, which I've always talked about, was why we're going to the sewage treatment plant. And after we do that, we can put out a newsletter, and in our newsletter, we can say, this is what we saw. This is why you smell what you smell. This is why you don't want to put things that you wouldn't want to drink down the drain. And this is why you then shouldn't use those things. It's public education that's going to really help us because of lack of authority. That we can't tell people not to do it, but we can tell them how they should.
Yes, and the vehicle is gonna be, I mean, we have 2 established now, right? But should we be thinking of another vehicle to do that?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think as we're gonna focus on, the things that we care about the most. And then
Okay.
another subject can just be,
Excellent.
public comment, right? So it can be the things that we care about as a committee, and we'll start our newsletters and our education there. And then if we get comment from, the public, and we say, if someone says, why does it smell like this? Or why are the power lines not underground? Or, we can go from there. So that was just something I thought.
Great comment. Thank you very much.
Purpose of focus. I think there are a couple of things that we should have in mind, and I just want to mention them so that they're in the minutes. One of the first things we should advise the community about is the work that's been done on this.
Yeah.
Right after the presentation to the
Absolutely,
supervisors.
absolutely.
And that should be in the newsletter and on the website. Along with however we just, Alex frames the recommendation.
If we have
So,
okay,
that would be one thing. The other thing would be what we're talking about right now. What are the priority environmental issues? To let the community know that we've looked at that, we've brainstormed it, and we've prioritized it. So that would be 2 things that would cover 2 months in the newsletter.
Sure.
The other comment that I want to make, and I can just ask a question, how many of our 7,000 residents have ever looked at our website or even get a chance to see our newsletter?
That's a good question.
Okay, and you can answer that for yourself. My answer, less than 10%.
Well, that's when I said missing, do we have the right
So
vehicle?
the point is, we need to find another way to
Exactly.
get out to those people. One, thing I think we should do is we should do what Alex did for the bike park. We should get a communication out in a variety of ways
QR code.
and ask for, what are your environmental issues? And God only knows what we'll hear when people start looking at that. But I think that would be a good thing to do.
James,
Okay, I'm done.
I mean, we have. Doesn't require any money for getting the word out. Cause you have Facebook. You have Instagram. You have LinkedIn,
Mhm.
okay, and. You have Pinterest, okay, those are all free. And you can add the EIC to those. And you can you can put the word out for the EIC through there. Also, on Facebook, they have a way of getting out special events, interest out to the community. And that doesn't cost anything.
Good point.
Okay, so that's a way of getting out to the public, the things that are going on.
James,
So
go ahead.
So what Mitch is saying, then maybe we can get some placard or something, we can put on the park. At the
I think,
down by River Park and over by the Mount Eagle Park.
don't you think this is a top part of the discussion for next week?
Right, but we're just making something that's gonna be part of next week's discussion. Because.
It's good to get all these things in the agenda.
Right, so this will be. part
Point of
the
order.
agenda.
It's a,
Please, let's keep to what we're talking about.
What we're
We
talking
weren't
about
just saying- this is
specifically, the EAC outreach to share concerns and updates with residents.
That's it,
Sorry.
that's it.
Well, so I think
Put it
we're
under-
right on the point.
yeah, we are, put it under increasing visibility for the things that we create. It's
Right,
very simple.
that's
So-
part of the agenda for next week.
Any additional, and that, I have to say something about that. Who's gonna do all that? Who's gonna do how are we gonna
We're gonna discuss it
accomplish
next
it?
week.
No, I mean, that's what you need to think about. We have no staff and we have Alex, who has got a million other things to do. And maybe some of us should volunteer if we're social, if we're on social, we know so much about social.
Social.
Stuff,
Social media is called.
okay.
Since you asked the question,
Mhm.
the answer to that question is you form subcommittees to do these things.
Mhm. Makes sense to have a subcommittee that helps with this.
Well, the subcommittees from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people.
No,
we
the
have to
subcommittee
get-
can include residents and interest.
That makes sense.
And that way you start to expand the participation and involvement throughout the township.
Because the ordinance says that can be done.
That's, yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
See, they're getting
Hey,
excited.
we have people who want to be part of it.
Comments?
Yeah,
Yes,
Public comment.
okay, I have, I know that you guys have stated several times, that you have like no authority or, to do anything. Now, I just have, a concern. Now, there's a new construction by my home that, I complained to the supervisors and to the township at several meetings with the zoning officer. They came in and they trucked all this soil in, it was just a big mess. So finally I had enough and went to a board of supervisors meeting. And I, expressed my, concerns. Well, then it was, I think, Julia who gave me the Monroe County Conservation District's phone number. I called them the next morning, they came out. The gentleman in the builder, there was like, I think, 7 violations that, you know, he was, you know, in fault of. He notified the township supervisor, they notified the township zoning officer, but nothing was done. They were told to cease, and it just continued. It continued for over a month. Then I had to call again after reaching out to Julia. So my concern is, you know, this panel here sits up here and you guys spend a lot of time and effort coming here, having the meetings, but yet your hands are tied. So my question is, this should have never happened from what the gentleman at the conservation district told me. So with this new construction, there was no fencing, there was no, there's like a stream over, and I think Alex had just talked about, like over by, Shawnee Valley. There, that's, you know, where this, new construction is. Well, there's creeks and there's rivers and we're up here, and this just went on from November until the end of March, and and I think you had said that the supervisor said, come to us, you know, and, you know, well, I went to them. One of the supervisors lives right next door to me. He went to them, nothing got done. So my concern is that the waters got contaminated from November till March. And then they went out on I brought the report on the 27th of February. And still nothing was done. Nothing was done for a whole entire month. And they got a CO, they got everything, they can still continue to do everything when they had like, you know, like a cease, you know, letter, but they still, that like, so what I'm trying to figure out is, how did this happen? You know, when you guys here, you know, are saying like, you have no power, go to the supervisor, you go to the supervisor, supervisors don't do anything, go to the zoning officer, have 3 meetings with the zoning officer, he doesn't do anything, oh, it's base engineering's issue, it's this and that, but in the meantime, the stream is getting, you know, polluted. So as a resident, that's very frustrating, you know, and I'm sure as, you know, you're sitting up there, it's hearing this is probably frustrating to you, you know, so I don't like, you know, who's responsible for this? Like, who's responsible, like, or is there maybe some like a committee that, you know, you guys can implement that when a new like construction comes in and they start, you know, ripping down trees and like trucking in dirty dirt and doing all of this stuff, like, who does that? Like, you know, supposedly the zoning officer goes out and checks it. Now, he didn't see that. He didn't see all of that, you know what I mean? Like, and here I'm just a, you know, a resident, and I can see it. And when I spoke to the, you know, the conservationist that came out, he said it's residents like you that, you know, are what we need, because it is disturbing to the fact that all these people go out who have all these degrees and everything, but yet just ignore it. So, I mean, I don't, like, how do we do better? That's my concern. Like, how do we do better as a township? To like, who do we call? So if I call you guys, you know, and you go, you know, go to the supervisor, you know, and this stuff doesn't get done, you know, you know, I think someone had said like the #1 thing was like, you know, your waterways, like, well, it's being polluted, you know, for 3 months and nobody did anything about it until I came and I expressed my concerns like I'm expressing to you guys here today. So, you know, then something, you know, was done, but like the gentleman said, it could be too late at that point. You see what I mean? Like, it should have been done as soon as the trees were taken down, this special like erosion plan and all this stuff, nothing was done. Nothing was done by this builder, and he knows better from what I'm told. These are like, I guess, standard things that need to be done, but weren't done. And our township just didn't do anything. And I literally called every week since November. And then it wasn't until I started outing them at the township supervisors meeting, because no permits and like, it was so on and so on. I know that has nothing to do with you, but my concern is now that they came out and it like the pollution got into the water stream, and it's like right there where, you know, we live, but you know, nobody would listen. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys can go back to the supervisors, or how do we prevent this from happening again with new constructions, or, I mean, I don't know if you guys.
Yeah.
you know,
I'll take that really quick, just because I'm familiar with it a little bit, but
Okay.
I think that in every township, there's, you know, kind of a number that you can call and or in every town. But it would probably make more sense for us as an environmental committee because we're gonna get asked these things in the future. So we should probably come up with a list of what we should do if someone comes up to someone in the environmental council with a potential environmental concern, and it's on the website right now, right? For the township, is that correct, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you reach out to the, you know, if it's, there isn't like a section on the website that says call here if you have an environmental concern, like a
Yeah.
big, you know, yeah. I
But
would
for
say-
us, we should probably have you know, this is what we do, because if people know that we're on the committee, same exact thing, they're gonna be saying, oh, Eric, I just saw this. This is what I saw, and for us, we can say, okay, well, you know. This is the way to handle a potential issue, because we have no idea, and we have no, you know, no one in this group is gonna be able to say, oh, that's wrong. You know,
Right.
but it would be helpful for us to say, if there is a potential, you know, environmental concern or hazard. This is what us as a group can do to address it for the members of the, you know, the township. You're bringing up something and I know it's gonna happen again, so.
Well, right,
For-
exactly, and
for
that's
the
the thing,
committee.
we're like, who?
And
who's
the answer is, we don't know.
responsible?
The
Right,
answer is
that's
we don't
right,
know.
no, and I understand that, but that's why I'm saying, like, you guys are, you know, here, because, you know. You want, you know, obviously you're protecting, you wanna try to protect the environment, you wanna do, you know, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, you know, like I'm coming here and I'm giving you, you know, my complaint, or not even really a complaint, I'm just saying, oh my gosh, this is happening. But yet, it's like I said, I've gone to all the levels, and then it's not until I've gone through a public comment and like called it out that people wanted to help us. And what I was wondering is like, if a complaint comes in, now, were you guys notified that I've been complaining? That's the thing, like, I think there's just like what is it, like a lack of communication all the way around. So if a complaint comes in, you know, like you were saying, you know, that like my, you know, perfect example with this, pollution, should whoever's taking that call, like, send it over to you guys, or,
No,
you know, I mean, like, how does, like, you know, that's what I'm saying, like, who gets like those
That's not.
calls?
Did you get a report from the conservation district?
Yes.
No, I
Did
To
they?
get the-
haven't not been,
The other.
are you asking me?
No, I'm asking
Oh,
her.
I asked her.
Yeah. Right here, I.
Of what the violations were?
Yeah, there were, I think, 7 of them, yeah.
Chapter
Alex?
102.
Alex, just, wouldn't it, does this fall under EPA, state, environmental protection?
And no, I don't think it does. It falls under townships, conservation district, DEP, generally
And
speaking.
the township is not willing,
The EPA delegates its authority to the DEP. And then, you know, in a home rule state like Pennsylvania, the local township has a lot of jurisdiction over these sorts of things.
so it's something that should be addressed at the planning commission?
No, that's definitely, I mean, I don't know the full story. I haven't really been kept in the loop on a lot of this, to be honest.
Right.
I'm actually learning by listening to you.
Right,
But things of this nature get to the township manager and code, especially the code enforcement officer. Generally, my knowledge is it has to be a formal complaint, it has to be put on the complaint form, and then, you know, that's.
Did you make a formal, did you write out a complaint form?
no, I actually, I called several times, and I had, they told me I needed to speak with, the new, I talked to the old zoning officer, then they had me have, 2 meetings with the new zoning
There's a
officer.
form, there's a form on the Smithfield Township website where you can make a formal complaint. Okay, and there's a difference between you talking to someone and you write it down.
Okay,
And then when you write it down, submit this paperwork.
She
okay,
went to the supervisors.
yes, I went to.
Right.
She was at, it was
Yeah,
at a
no,
public
I-
meeting.
And I was
Right.
gonna say, and I emailed, and then I also had.
I
They had me
think,
come in and have 2 meetings specifically with them. Then I was given to call Base Engineering, that was Base Engineering's issue. Called Base Engineering, got a runaround from them, then they said it was back to the
Because-
township. And then the worst part of it is that our own supervisor who lives next door, he on public forwarded complaints and they ignored him. So that's what's pretty sad about the whole situation is that,
I just,
you know,
because Pennsylvania is different than most states. And once you write it down, it's different than when you talk to someone. Because when you talk to someone, they're gonna say, let me put them with someone else. And then you talk to someone and they listen to, oh, wait a minute, let me put you to someone else. But if you make that complaint out and you write it or submit it online,
right, like I submitted it and then I actually, well, I sent emails. That's what I'm saying. There was emails and emails and then they had to come in.
there's a
and-
difference.
Yeah.
Once you fill, there's a form,
Mhm.
okay? That form makes you anonymous. Okay? So that form is a complaint form, it's made special for you to file a complaint. Okay, it's different than you calling, because calling, I
Well,
don't
if it's
think ever,
anonymous, how,
because what they make it anonymous so that they don't identify who the complainant is.
Right,
They just identify that there is a complaint and that it needs to be addressed. Once it's written down, it's completely different than you talking to someone.
yeah,
Because you could talk to the supervisors and you can make a voice and say what, but it's not the same because then once it's written down, it's signed by you, submitted, then it has to go through the people that are responsible.
I'm gonna call
They
a point
have
of
to-
order on the discussion.
I have a recommendation on this.
no, Pat can call point of order, that's the chairperson's prerogative, though, Mitch, I mean, if he feels it's getting, beyond.
Well, I certainly,
I just.
Have heard the
I'm just asking
you've repeated yourself
Okay.
3 times.
so that you can, so that,
About
I
what
do
you should
that
And
sometimes.
let me just say
Okay.
something once.
I think that.
Well, I mean,
I would like,
I mean, there's a
Make
point
the-
of order
they
that's
make
been
the-
called, so like, you have to defer to the chair and then you.
Well,
can vote
point
on
of
the
order,
technically.
If you're going to,
I think this should be included in our minutes. That this should be added to our minutes, which the supervisors get, this is the DEP.
Well, what is it, Mitch? Because I'm the recording secretary. And
Yes.
You're saying, include it in the minutes.
I would like
I
to
don't know
see
what
this
it is.
chapter 102 inspection report included in our minutes. And that we make the recommendation to the supervisors that this be forwarded to the zoning officer, who is the only person who can actually file a complaint. And then it has to be addressed by the solicitor, the township solicitor.
has the zoning officer seen this?
Yes, it was,
That's what I thought.
it was, I think on the bottom, if I'm not mistaken, I.
Now, there's a new zoning officer now.
Well, the new zoning
Yeah, it says
officer
it was-
has seen it.
It
So-
says,
Come on, guys, point of order.
it says under here, Smithfield, it says CC Smithfield Township Supervisors and Zoning Officers. So I know that they received it, and that's what's also concerning to me is that they received it, and you would think that when they received it, they would have come out. Now, that was the 27th, and they still were doing work after that, when it was like,
Thank you.
they were told not to.
What are you talking?
So, I just don't know who's responsible, like, you're the environmental, and obviously.
It has to get to the zoning officer. who
It's
can-
gotten to the zoning officer.
Pardon me?
It has gotten to the zoning, that's her problem.
That's my problem. It got to the, see, if you look underneath there,
That's
it's not right
that's
here.
another issue.
So I don't think there's anything we can do at
Yes,
this
we can.
particular point.
Yes, we can.
What would you like to do?
I want to include it in the minutes. I want it brought to the attention of the supervisors and the zoning officer that this needs to be addressed from an environmental point of view.
Well,
And
okay,
that a complaint was filed with us in our meeting. We can do that.
I make a motion,
Well, you can't move on something that's on the agenda, James, point of order on that.
not part of
You
the,
can't act on something that's not on the agenda.
we can emergency, but
It is on the agenda. It's public comment.
It's not, I understand, it's not you can't take action on something like that, though, that's the.
I'd like to just thank you very much for bringing it up to this committee too. I know you're frustrated and I know you've brought it up to a lot of different people and
Right, no, I just want, like, moving forward, it's like, it's water under the bridge, but the reason I'm bringing it up to your committee is because I want something needs to be done, like, it should never get to this point, is what I'm saying. And if you guys are being, the environmental committee, is there a way that you guys can, like, who oversees it so that it doesn't, like, get to this point? Like, from what I'm speaking to the conservationists, as soon as they broke ground, those fences should have come up and everything should have been taken care of. Well, whose responsibility is it? And then that's why what I'm trying to say is, you guys are here working, late at night here and having, meetings with the public. And if your hands are tied, and I think this gentleman said, like, you don't have power, you need to do anything. Well, we need to, like, for the residents, we need to do something. We need to change that, whether, like, it's more resident involvement. Who's gonna go out with these new constructions to make sure that, our streams and our river, whatever, is not being polluted? That's my concern. That's.
That
That's a
builder,
good
that builder
suggestion.
had to post a permit.
you want to speak, Keith's got the floor.
Okay, thank you. Alex, question. I can make a motion that we add this to the next meeting's agenda.
You could just suggest it.
Okay, I'd like to
What is-
suggest very strongly
Just
that we
have
add
to-
this to our agenda for the next meeting, so we can address the issue.
Well, I think it will be in our priorities discussion, don't you?
I mean, this is what is this, is it looks like it's a chapter 102 inspection report from the conservation district. This is not a township document. This is from the conservation district, and there was a complaint of earth disturbance, no perimeter controls have been installed, et cetera, et cetera. And the action items that this landowner was given are install perimeter controls down slope of the fill material, temporarily stabilize areas where there will be a cessation of earth disturbance activities for at least 4 days, and then submit an erosion sediment control plan to the MCCD for review and approval. So this is not at this point. I don't see any township action on this.
But the township has seen that, right?
It says it right on the bottom, they were CC'd, all supervisors and zoning.
Now, you can discuss maybe a way for, there is, I think James was right. I would say that James made a very good point. There is a specific form that a resident must fill out in order for the township to officially act on something. If that form, that resident could submit a 17-page email to the township manager and supervisors, but they are not required to act on that until that specific form is filled out in the correct format. The moment that form is submitted, then the township then the process begins. And if that form is not submitted, then the process may not begin. And so I think the council needs to recommend to people that they fill that specific form out. That one form is the one that will get the ball rolling on the township side.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that needs to be done, because I mean, I've called every week since November and not one time has it nothing, it's come in and have a meeting.
It's on the
We'll
website.
schedule a meeting, we'll do this and that, and like I said, nothing got done.
Is that form on our website?
Yep,
It's been up there for over a year.
And as for the permits, that was another issue, they didn't put a permit up there, and then when they did hang it up, it was for Pocono Township. So that's how lovely our zoning officer and the township, yeah, I mean, you can still go there, it's still hanging up there, they have the wrong residence and the wrong permit from another township, but that's a whole other story. So that's,
well,
yeah.
that becomes an issue. That becomes an issue, and strongly, I recommend that you go to the website and download or fill it out, and then submit it.
Okay,
Yeah, and the EAC, if you get complaints like this from the public, you need to know to instruct the people to fill out the form, and that, the township, like if somebody calls
Absolutely.
50 times to the township, that's not going to elevate it to the same level as the submitted form. That's in every township. If there's something that's really bad going on, then somebody has to fill out that form, a real person that lives in the township, or a real person that's willing to put their name on it, but it stays anonymous. But if it gets to court and it gets subpoenaed, then that person may appear. So but you still have to fill the form out. And so I think it's a little unfair to say that, township, if that form is filled out and then something doesn't happen, then it's a different story. But if it hasn't been filled out, then you're kind of in a tough spot because.
Well, why didn't someone tell her to fill it out?
I
That's-
think,
you.
I
Yeah, well, why-
don't
why-
know, I haven't been there,
That,
honestly.
and I think we cannot do anything more with this tonight.
Right,
Is that an agreement
yeah, I think that,
that it's an issue? I believe that.
Our own township supervisor, not to interrupt you, put a complaint in, because he
Is
was
that an
next
extra
door.
copy?
yeah, you can have that, I have one.
It's also worth
I
it.
don't think that the supervisor can make a complaint.
Anyway,
He
well-
said it in a public meeting.
anybody can make a complaint.
Yeah.
Right, but
Anyone here can make a complaint, but somebody has, a person has to make the complaint.
right,
It's not sufficient to
Point of
come
order.
to a public
The
meeting.
chairman has the authority to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
I am adjourning the meeting.
That's fair.
just go ahead and.
We
fill
have
out-
a meeting
make
2
sure you
weeks from now.
Fill it out. Okay, and submit it,
Okay,
okay, and sign it.
okay.
Doesn't have